Brittany here to join us. We kicked Bill to the curb. We didn't trust him up here, so we put him back there where Olivia can keep an eye on him for a bit. So we're going to talk about weight loss here in a minute, but tell us about yourself a little bit first.
Well, where do I start? Where do you want me to start?
You don't have to do the full story, but kind of, what you do, how you got into jiu-jitsu and all that. Yeah.
Well, I am 36 and I am a mom of 2 girls and, I'm married, and my husband and I started training probably about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
When I started training, it was really, I didn't even know what jiu-jitsu was. I just wanted to find something that was like an outlet that we could do together that was healthy. Something that maybe like the whole family could do eventually. And so we went in, we started training. I thought I had the intention of doing it maybe once a week. And then I really loved it.
You get addicted to it.
I was addicted. Yeah.
Yep.
And it like our gym, is so amazing. So I was even training without my husband when he couldn't make it, if he had to work or whatever. So, so then I'm a hairstylist, full-time hairstylist, and running my kids constantly and just trying to find the balance of family life.
So you're juggling, full-time job, your own business, trying to train kids. Yeah. So it's a lot.
Yeah.
So your question, I guess, was you wanted to lose some body fat. Tell me what you're trying to get out of all this.
So, I feel like the balance of everything, right? Like I like to have fun and I like to enjoy myself, but I also have done every fad diet there is out there. I've done so many different things like keto and, watch, documentaries, and then all of a sudden I'm trying to, go vegan or whatever. And,
Sure.
I feel good for a little while, and then I go back to my normal ways, which are not unhealthy. I think overall I do pretty well, but I would like to lose body fat. It's not about being super skinny, but I want to feel strong and fit and have longevity.
Right.
So.
And you also have another goal. You want to compete coming up at purple belt here soon. So getting down to a weight class you think you should be at, I guess. So it's a good point, because many times when I have patients come in and want to talk about weight loss, first of all, I don't like that term. Body composition change is what I usually use, because who cares how much you weigh as long as your clothes fit you, right?
Right, yeah.
But if you're competing, you kind of have to weigh in.
Yeah.
So we kind of do have to talk about that a little bit. But in general, so you're just trying to get down, instead of doing this last minute weight cut where you're cutting a bunch of water, you actually want to kind of lean out a little bit to do it more naturally.
Right.
Okay, that's perfect. So you mentioned a bunch of diets you've been on. What was the failing point of that? It just not sustainable?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about that. What was it, just became neurotic for you?
Yeah. I've done where I'm macro counting, and you're weighing your food and you're making sure you have certain, amount of protein and carbs and fat. And then with that, there's so much information out there. It's overwhelming, because it's okay, if you're going to eat carbs, then you need to have lower fat. If you're going to have fat, then you need to have lower carbs. And so I've tried tweaking different things, but when it comes down to it, it's living day to day and being a working mom and all of that. It's it's you get to a point where it's failure, because you can't carry a scale in your purse and be weighing your food and doing all that stuff. So.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And it causes, I don't know about you, but other patients have told me it causes anxiety.
Oh, for sure. Because you're I'm starving. I need to eat. And I needed to eat 2 hours ago, but I didn't have time. So now I'm cooking the chicken breast and I'm cutting it up and I'm weighing it and I'm putting a square of chicken back on the dish because it's over the grams. I can't live like that.
Yeah, no one really can. That's why diets don't work.
Do you mix in some Reese's Pieces?
Yeah.
Bill is drinking a Pepsi and eating Reese's over there. So.
Well, Bill has a problem. And we've addressed that before, but as you guys will know, as we get through this podcast into the episodes, he's a mess. So, yeah, that would take a a long time to kind of crack that nut. So
Well, I might be easier than Bill then.
Oh,
so I'm glad you're starting here.
For sure. You know, you brought up a bunch of good points, and you know, we do see people. All diets do fail. Typically, you really have. They always say, "Oh, you have to change your lifestyle." Okay, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And what works for you may not work for your cousin, or vice versa, or your husband seems to like. Well, he can drop weight doing this, and I can't, and it's really frustrating.
It is frustrating.
So over the years, you know, there are people that are dogmatic on like, well, keto's the only way to go, or, you know, being vegan or whatever it is. And it's just not that easy, because what we found out is nutrition is really individual. I hate that Bill's going to ping me on this, but it's one of the things I wrote about in my own book published in 2015. And, yep, there's a little rim shot. Yeah, every time I refer to my own book, it's kind of a, I don't know, it's kind of a douchebag thing to do.
It's okay. I have your book. I have it.
Well,
so
of course you do.
I do.
But
Did he give it to you?
No, I purchased it.
oh my
Bill.
gosh.
Stop it.
But
Yes.
anyway, that was back in 2015, and we're in 2022 now. And, you know, we started talking about individualized nutrition and all the things that go into that. And I think more recently, Rob Wolf did a fantastic job in his book, Wired to Eat, which was several years, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. He talked about the same thing. And it's really true. I mean, we can't look at everyone and have a cookie cutter approach. And so we need data, right? And so now we can do things like that. And what I'm doing more and more of people is have them wear a continuous glucose monitor. And I heard you have a good doctor.
I do.
That prescribed one for you. Yeah, we'll have her on at some point in the near future. She's kind of a friend of mine too.
Well, why is it that we have to have a prescription for a glucose monitor?
That is such a good idea and a good question. So it doesn't make any sense at all, because it's typically in our modern medical society, we're not doing anything about a problem until someone has it. So you're really, you know, only diabetics should get continuous glucose monitors. Well, you know what? That's probably too far down the road by that point.
Right.
I like to identify people that, especially with a family history, which we'll talk about here in a second, of metabolic syndrome, obesity, diabetes. Hey, let's start looking at this stuff early. And I don't know, let's prevent it maybe.
Yeah.
Weird. It's kind of my medical specialty is preventive medicine. And so if we can do that now, I mean, not to mention the pain and suffering, but do you know how much diabetics cost the medical?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it's unbelievable, right? And so if we can intervene early, to answer your question, Bill, I have no idea. It doesn't make any sense to me. And they jack up the prices of these things, so then you can only afford them if it's covered by insurance. I think there's some new ones coming out. Hopefully more and more people are going to be doing this to kind of see, you know, how they're, and we'll talk more about why we want to do that in the first place. But anyway, it's a really good question. I don't think they should need a prescription.
Yeah.
That's just my personal opinion on that.
Right.
I mean, you can go to Walmart and get the, you know, the diabetic test strips. You don't need a prescription to do that. And your own little, you know, one, you know, so why should you need one for this?
I don't know.
So anyway, let's back up a little bit. Tell me about some family history. Do you have any history of obesity, metabolic disease?
All
like
of it.
that?
I mean, not me personally, but like my family. I mean, like my dad is diabetic, but it's not too, I mean, he's not on insulin yet. My grandfather has been on insulin for a long time. Right. He's diabetic. He just had quadruple bypass open heart surgery.
Right.
Yeah, it's like between obesity and diabetes, it's rampant in my family.
Right. And a lot of us anymore are in the same boat. And at 36, identifying some of these things is a great idea. So you don't have to go down that route, as you know. So the reason why the continuous glucose monitor is kind of an interesting kind of a technology where before, you know, people would have to, you know, kind of prick their skin and take blood tests, and this thing you can wear for up to 2 weeks, and it takes blood glucose readings like, every 5 minutes or so.
Nice.
And it's pretty nice. And it goes right to your smartphone and you can collect all the data. And the cool thing about it is we can see how you respond to food. Things you might think you have no problem with, you may very well have a problem with it. You may not know it.
What does that mean by problem? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, it's a good question, Bill. So, for instance, let's say let's say you're eating, there's a certain grain you like to eat. Mm-hmm. And something you've always ate. And
rice.
Or something else, a wheat product or something like that. Toast or something. Mm-hmm. And you really don't know because once it goes in your mouth, it's a black box to you. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can kind of tell, I don't really feel so good after that, but sometimes you can't, and the gut is the first place where we get an inflammatory response. Matter of fact, most of the immune system's down there along the gastrointestinal tract for a reason. Mm-hmm. And so some people can have, even though if it's not like a high load carb thing, they can be eating something that produces an inflammatory response. And that in turn, inflammation drives insulin resistance, even temporarily, which then can have you unable to dispose of blood glucose and then, the whole metabolic chain. So you may not even be aware of something. And then by doing a food log and all this type of monitoring, we can kind of figure out what's wrong.
Okay.
Or a potential problem for you that you may not be aware of. And just by, instead of that, let's just try replacing it with something else and then look at what the data shows.
Okay.
So the idea is, if you got just looking at blood glucose, fasting blood glucose is not the best way to do to determine whether or not you're diabetic or how you're handling stuff, because there's so many variables that even on a fasting state that kind of affect blood glucose. You could have a night of poor sleep. That will stress your system and actually produce more cortisol, which you can actually produce higher blood glucose. It may not be your baseline. So like taking a fasting blood glucose test one time and having your doctor look at it, it's just a snapshot in time, as opposed to a lot of data points. And that's the whole idea, that over a course of 10 days to 2 weeks, like a continuous glucose monitor would be really helpful. So fasting glucose traditionally, if you are under 100, you're considered to be normal. Okay. If you're between 100 and 125, that's pre-diabetic, and 126 and over is diabetic for fasting. Okay. So when you eat, the reason why it's a problem is glucose, which, oh, by the way, is derived from breakdown of complex and simple carbohydrates like starch, pasta, bread, simple sugars, things like that, potatoes, rice. Excuse me. It needs to be cleared from the bloodstream because it's toxic in high levels in the bloodstream. It causes its own inflammatory response. Diabetes that's why diabetics, they can't dispose of their glucose and utilize it correctly because of insulin resistance, and it will build up in their bloodstream. They're unable to dispose of it correctly. It's called poor glucose tolerance or insulin resistance. So you may ask, well, so what? Excuse me.
If you cough into the mic again, I'll kill you.
I got to get a drink. That's what happens when you're old. You start making noises like that.
What do you got in there?
I don't know.
It's a margarita.
It tastes good, though. Maybe a little bit of extra in there. I don't know. But it's a surrogate for what's going on in your body. For instance, you can have a healthy person and they have one night of bad sleep. It can make you set up a stress response in your body to make you, for a short time, insulin resistant to the point where you're at a pre-diabetic or diabetic state. And so your blood sugars your blood glucose won't be able to be disposed of. And so there's a lot of things that drive that. And we want to make sure that you're able to dispose of that blood glucose in a good manner. And the only way we know how to do that is by monitoring it, of what you're eating. Now, what happens when there's excess blood glucose that can't be disposed of either into the liver, or into the muscle, or into the fat cells? Basically, it's converted into triglycerides, which is stored as fat. So when we monitor you, and we want to see like two hours after your meal, we'll see what your blood glucose is doing. If it's still pretty high, it means you're not really disposing of it well. And there's something going on preventing that. It could be what you're eating, the amount of what you're eating, what time you're eating, and other factors like sleep, stress, and things like that.
Okay.
So it's going to give us some good data points. So like I said, if you're not able to dispose or utilize that glucose, it's going to be stored. Your body is like, hey, we got to get rid of this stuff.
So
Right.
how do you do that? Like, what are some ways that you
For what?
dispose of?
Yeah. So the liver is a place where glucose goes from the bloodstream. I can store a little amount. Liver is like a banker. It can take in glucose and kind of divvy it out as it needs to. So when you're sleeping at night, parts of the brain need glucose. Not all of it, but parts of it are dependent on glucose. So while you're sleeping and not eating, it's able to kind of divvy out some glucose while you're fasting. So the liver can take glucose in and store a little bit of it, and also push it out. The biggest disposal tank, so to speak, of glucose is skeletal muscle. So that's why doing high intensity exercise, clearing out what we call muscle glycogen, which is the storage form of glucose, is useful, because then you create a huge empty tank to then take glucose out of the bloodstream.
Is that like the whole fasted cardio in the morning? Is that what you're doing?
No, that's a good question. No. Fasted cardio, that's a whole nother subject. They're talking about doing like a low level cardio to stay kind of in the quote unquote aerobic zone. So you're burning more fat. So, theoretically, I'm talking about more high intensity exercise where you're actually making your body burn glucose from the muscle.
Okay.
Because unlike the liver, once glucose goes in the muscle and is stored, it doesn't come back out.
Okay.
And it's like that for a reason, so we can use it in case of a flight or fight response. So, if we had to fight or run away from our predator, that's why we have that system in place. But many of us don't do a whole lot of exercise. I'm not including, you obviously do.
Yeah.
But many of us don't clear out any of that stuff. So we have this full tank of glucose in the form of glycogen in the muscle. The liver's all full. And then we're eating a bunch of pasta.
Right.
And there's nowhere for it to go. So the fat cells try to okay, we got to make this stuff into fat to store it, to get it out of the bloodstream. But eventually the body can't keep up with that.
So when you do work out in the morning, like how I do, I work out usually 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
I have a cup of coffee before, but I don't really eat before. What is that doing? Is that a bad thing? Should you be fueling before?
No, it's such a good question, and we're going to go into that on our follow up.
Okay.
It's a great question because it's not good or bad. It's dependent on
the person. Okay.
On the person, what the intensity of the exercise,
okay,
and where you're at metabolically. So it's a really good question. Okay. We'll come back to that. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole yet.
Okay.
Because what we're going to do with you is we're going to have you, and this is kind of a pain, okay? But we're only going to have you do it for 10 days.
Right.
Okay. You're going to create a log for yourself. And you're going to have that continuous glucose monitor, which we'll show you how to use.
Okay.
You're going to record what you eat and what time you eat. You don't have to be crazy and I ate 50 grams of whatever.
Okay.
Just, you can, ballpark that.
Okay.
You know what you normally
eat. In short
eat.
term, I could do that for 10 days. It's
right.
More
you could.
for the rest of my life.
Yeah, we're not going to be doing that. This is just to get some data. You're also going to score yourself on when you wake up in the morning between one, and this is non-scientific, but it is important because it's a sense of how good your sleep was. So with a 10 being, oh, that was an amazing night of sleep, I feel incredible, or 1, I barely slept.
Okay.
I do this every morning, but with how I look in the mirror. You are balding, your teeth suck, you got a little bit of ab on the top, but the rest is gone.
That's the opposite of the Stuart Smalley self-affirmation. Remember that from Saturday Night Live?
No. Or Stuart, the guy that goes, stop it.
No, the one that says, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me.
Oh, yeah, I don't do that.
I know you do the opposite of that. You basically are
fat turd. Why'd you even get out of bed?
Yeah, that's not a good motivational thing. But again, like I said, Bill, we have that's going to be quite a,
yeah.
Yeah, it's going
I
to be
can identify Bill, not with the bald part, but.
Sorry.
Oh my gosh, I had
You were on a roll.
I was on a great roll.
You
You know
were.
how I'm over 50 now, so gosh,
It's
who
okay.
knows if it's going to come back?
I'm writing it down. I'm writing down all of
thank you. Yes, we're
everything I do today.
We're
in the
logging.
day.
Yep.
But the sleep part, just rate yourself on a 1 to 10.
Okay.
Okay, because that's what matters anyway. How you are actually feeling, and that's actually it's fairly accurate over time. It's called interoception. It's how you kind of determine the state of your body, your
Right.
kind of your general feeling about it. And I also, at the end of the day, want you to rate your day on a stress level too.
Okay.
And just say, and we'll just keep 10 being good.
Okay.
Okay. Like that was a great day, super relaxing, or it was a shit show.
Okay.
As a 1. It's terrible. I have all this stuff going on at once. Because all this is going to come into play in how your body responds, believe it or not, to what you eat too.
Okay.
And that's why we can't do these one-size-fits-all diets.
Right.
First of all, people's ancestry, what part of the world their ancestors came up in, their daily life, their stress levels, their sleep, the whole 9 yards, it affects your metabolism.
Okay.
Your gut microbiome is how there's things, the bacteria that live in your intestine also really contribute to how you process food. And that's just over the past several years, we've really paid attention to that. So that's why tracking what you eat, your stress, your sleep, and then finally your exercise, whatever activity you're doing. Go ahead and
Okay.
write that down and write the times down.
Okay.
And we're going to correlate all that data with what your continuous glucose monitor is doing. It'd be kind of interesting to see,
Right.
like stuff you thought you're doing okay with, and all of a sudden you're like 2 hours later and my glucose is still 150.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's a problem. Let's go back and see what you ate.
Okay.
And it could be not just what you ate, but what you ate it with. Because like I said, you could have been eating something that was enough, a starch that you could have disposed of, fine, but you ate something with it was inflammatory to your gut. You see what I'm saying? So we may just have to replace, kind of tool around with that. But at least we have some data points here and kind of figure out, okay, Brittany, rice is good for you. You clear that pretty well, but that sweet potato is probably not that. But I'm just as an example.
Okay.
Can someone follow along if they don't have the continuous glucose monitor and they just have the one that pricks their finger that you buy at Fred Meyer or something? If they wanted to follow along with Brittany or just new year, new me, and they wanted to do this journal, they could.
You sure can. Okay. You sure can. And so when we get the data points, I'm gonna kind of give a little bit of foreshadowing here. But when we have Brittany back on here, we're going to schedule you for about 2 weeks.
Okay.
Right? And we're going to review everything, and then we're going to talk more about kind of why the whys behind this and why we think this is happening, what physiologically is probably going on with you. But people can do that. Just understand that the little finger prick or the arm prick ones are decent, and will give us some data points.
And they hurt. I think they hurt.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that's fine. I think we'll get the continuous monitors is better, obviously more data points, but sure, I think that's a fine idea if people want to do that. Matter of fact, at the time when I wrote that book, we didn't really have these. We did, but not readily available like they are now. And so there we go. Every time I quote the book, I'm going to get in trouble. But that's what I wrote, is to do the actual testing with the traditional way. But now that we have better technology, I think it's going to be we're going to get a lot more data out of it. Typically what I like to see, I think in Rob Wolf's book, in Wired to Eat, he talked about it a lot more extensively. The continuous glucose monitor, and his thought was 2 hours after your meal, you should be between 90 and 115. of your blood glucose.
Okay.
And that's basically, you're clearing it okay.
Okay.
Not fat. This isn't fasting. This is actually, 2 hours after eating. I think if I remember in my book, I said under 120.
Okay.
We're kind of in the same ballpark.
Right.
And we'll talk about that. So, if you see 2 hours after your meal, you're like, holy cow, I'm in 150s. It's like, well, what the heck did you eat?
Yeah.
And what did your day look like that day?
Okay.
And so that's going to give you a lot more intuitive sense on what works and what doesn't. Because you know what? Guess what? Some people do really well on higher carb, lower fat. Some people do really well on low carb, higher fat.
Okay.
Again,
Yeah.
and some people do well with dairy, like if they're Northern European ancestry. Some people are terrible.
Bill with Dairy Queen all the time. Blizzard.
I
As he's eating a Reese's.
I
He's
love
shoving
how
a Reese's in his mouth right
you
now.
can come back anytime. I love the fact that unprovoked you went after Bill. That's a plus right there. That's fantastic.
That's BS.
There's something about him in the corner that I feel like I can dismiss him a
Yeah.
little more. He's not like right in front of me anymore.
It's just you and I.
I kind of
So
like
bougie.
that. So does that make sense so
Yes.
far why we're doing
Yeah.
this? So if you came to me and you're like, hey, Chris, I need a diet. I'm like, well, I can't really give you one. Now I know more about you, know about your history. And so if we didn't even do any of the testing with your history, I would, we could assume, and we may be wrong, that you may not tolerate high levels of carbohydrate
yeah.
and you may be one of those people that do well on lower carbohydrate, but we're going to talk about how important protein is when we look at
Right.
all your data and see what that actually because no matter what I think, it's going to be really cool to watch what actually is.
Right. Because, there's so many questions with protein, too, because it's like I am notoriously, don't take the time to eat meals regularly throughout the day.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'll eat a bar or a Premier protein shake or whatever.
And we'll see what's in that stuff, right?
And and so it's like, is it better than, or is it equal to for me to sit down and actually eat chicken breasts or,
I would probably
steak.
just guess that it's probably worse.
Okay.
Right? Well, most processed stuff, if you turn and look at the labels, even if it says, it has 20 grams of protein, you look at the labels, it has all this kind of weird
names.
Yeah, and all those weird names, all those chemicals, the body has to deal with those, and it's usually a stressor. And some people have worse time with it with others. Vegetable oils especially, things like that. And we're going to really break down when we have the data to kind of talk about those type of things, because that protein drink that you think, I'm getting a little protein in, and we're going to look and see what happens, right?
Okay.
And there's no rules to say that you have to eat, these regular frequent meals at all.
Okay.
I will tell you this: a lot of people like doing. We're going to do a whole podcast on fasting, but just a couple little nuggets here for that. Intermittent fasting can be amazing, or time restricted eating, whatever you call it. But in general, and when I say in general, I mean in general. I don't want people sniping at me like, well, I did. In general, women don't do as well with intermittent fasting than guys do, and it's not fair.
It's not.
What's the old adage? Women do twice the work and get half the results
Which
for,
is so
for weight
true.
loss. It is true.
So true.
A lot of it is, we're still figuring out. A lot of it's speculative, but it kind of makes sense where women, you have ovaries and a uterus, and you're built for reproduction, and you want to maintain. Nature wants you to maintain higher percentage of body fat to carry, successfully carry pregnancies. And guess what? It's really difficult to get lean for a lot of people.
Especially when you're like, I've done with that. That chapter's closed for me. I've had my girls,
you're like,
and now I'm like,
you're like, stop it already. Let me get.
I don't need
exactly.
that anymore.
And we'll talk about what's reasonable and what isn't. When women, this goes for guys too, but especially women, when you try to push body fat really, really low, good things don't usually happen to the endocrine system for women. You see women losing their menses and all kinds of reproductive issues.
Right.
So there's been a lot of more research in fasting. It's really interesting. And it doesn't mean that women shouldn't try it, but we'll talk more about that, maybe probably shorter fasting periods and for people that, I'm not going to do that to you, but, and the fact, guess what? We can't also just say that here's a 36-year-old female family history of diabetes and obesity. This is the answer we're going to do. No, because you also train what? Tell me what your type of exercise is. So
I do Jiu-Jitsu twice a week, and then I do Peloton.
And I've watched you roll, and you roll with a good high intensity.
Right.
And that's a compliment. Okay. I'm not trying to talk about your intermittent, maybe kicks to the face that happens sometimes.
That's they're in my way. It's not my fault.
It's a legit technique.
We've all been kicked in the face in this room.
Hey, you know what?
Exactly.
I don't know if I haven't kicked you, Bill. Have I?
Oh, it's coming.
Oh, well, if I haven't.
Brittany, we got to make sure that happens. No, my point being is that that's not the average person.
Right.
We're going to have to feed that activity too. And so we're going to talk about timing and all kinds of stuff around your specific lifestyle, family history, the whole 9 yards, right?
Okay.
So right now you're like, wow, what a waste of time. I came in here and talked to them about my life and stuff. I didn't get any, yet we're not going to give you any recommendations at this point because we want the data first.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
What I'm normally doing, not changing anything, so we can fix it.
Or what needs to be fixed.
Yeah,
You may be doing something great, and we're like, oh, look at this. I think it's going to be really eye-opening for people. And before I go any further, what questions do you have right now for me?
I mean, I think that it's more of like the going forward is like when I'll have the questions, because right now, I mean, I can write down all the data and do my normal things, which I always feel like, man, like, why am I not getting results when, my calories are not even super high and I eat healthy? And
I wouldn't mind knowing, what do you think you eat like right now? Because it would be interesting to hear what like your perception is right now.
Are you asking like what I eat, or if I think I eat well?
Like what? So like what do you think your journal is going to look like? And then when we go over the journal, we'll be able to kind of see that how close you were.
Okay.
Because a lot of time, like I think like I don't eat gas station food that much. And then
I never do that. I can say that.
And then Olivia goes over our bills and she's like, hey, you spent $200 at the gas station. And that could be sushi.
I was going to say gas station sushi.
Oh my gosh, that is disgusting.
I've done it.
Are a brave man.
I've done it.
That is disgusting.
You know what? Keep your judgmental self. And
he is in the corner right now. We'll be a little nice to him.
So like I mean, to be 100% honest, like my typical day would be like, okay, a weekday and a weekend. Okay, I'm gonna do a weekday first. Okay. So my typical weekday is I wake up about 5:30, and then I have a cup of coffee with like 2 tablespoons of, I use like the Nut Pod creamer, and then I usually go out to the garage. I do a cycling Peloton. This is like typical, probably 4 days a week. And then sometimes I'll add on like a 15 or 20 minute strength, all Peloton workouts, because I like the class. I like just to be able to follow along and not have to think. And then I come in and get ready for my day. And then I take the kids to school. When I get back, I'll eat like a bar. And so
what is that?
Like I usually do like a protein bar from like Costco, like the Kirkland. And it's like, low carb. It says,
you
like,
see my little
carbs.
judgy face.
You are so judgy. You're like, you're failing already. I know all your problems. And then I'll get busy working, and I'll have intention of like, okay, while my client is processing, I'll go eat lunch. But then we get talking or whatnot, and I don't have time. So then I'll drink like a protein shake, like a Premier protein shake. Go ahead with the judgy face.
I wasn't. But remember, Bill's the one that asked this. I wasn't going to say
yeah, but I ain't judging.
Well, I haven't stopped at Dairy Queen or 7-Eleven so far in my day. So
what is with the hate in here? Good family establishments.
And then sometimes in the afternoon, I'll have usually like a salad with some kind of protein. I'll go train jiu-jitsu or run my kids around to wherever sport they're at that night. And then this is where I think that I really feel like this is the time that I usually am hungry by this time. And then I don't eat bad, but I eat bigger portions. So like I'll have like steak and kimchi and rice, like, or eggs and rice and like some kind of vegetable. We like that most nights. That's like our typical day. So the amount of calories that I'm eating is not a lot. But then on the weekends, like sometimes we'll go out to Mexican food or something.
El Paraiso, holla.
And El Paraiso. They have really good margaritas. And I'll have a margarita. And I'll have some chips and salsa. And I'll have some ceviche. And that will be like my treat. That's like my thing that I love. Or if we don't go to Mexican, I'll have a few glasses of wine or 3 and whatever. But like the meals all pretty much are similar. Like I feel like we eat pretty much the same things a lot. So that's pretty typical.
Yeah, we'll look at exactly what that is. Right.
But I don't eat very much during the day is my point. Like I think I could just like Glenn, my husband, is more of like he wants to sit down and eat like a full meal where I could like.
How many times a day does he want to eat? Be honest.
I would say like he probably eats 4 real meals a day.
That's a man.
Yeah.
That is such a man.
He is. He really is.
Full body.
He doesn't do well with like me though, because I could just like eat like, oh, here's some cauliflower chips and I'll just eat a few of those and I'm good for a while. And he's like, no, I need like food, real food. Yeah.
Hungry man's.
No, that's really helpful though. So with your goal here, just I guess we should tie in, what you're looking for, like when your competition is and what you're, you don't have to tell how much you weigh or anything like that, but what are you realistically looking to kind of cut?
I would like to lose at least 10 pounds.
Okay.
To put, maybe like 10 to 15 would be great because, if I have to weigh in with a gi, I don't know which tournament I'm going to do, just to get me into the right weight class.
So you want to feel, and you want to have some wiggle room there too. So you're not like, when you're on with the gi on, you're like
really close. Yeah. Where I'm having to like.
So we're talking about 10 to 15 pounds?
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of that, normally what I tell patients that come in to talk to me about this is throw your scale away.
Right.
And people do not like that.
No, especially people like me who like step on the scale daily.
Well, it becomes neurotic because then, things like water retention and, they can be like, oh, I lost 2 pounds, but then I gained 3. People, guess what? That stuff shifts over time. The way your clothes fit you are much more important. So what I typically have people do is just do their waist measurement at the belly button.
Okay.
With a tape. And we'll do that we'll have you do that every week.
Okay.
Do a baseline today.
Okay.
We'll have you do that every week because that really long term is much more important because, I always tell, this was years ago, I had someone, younger, this younger lady and talking about the same thing. And she was in really good shape, but she weighed, the number was something she didn't like. I'm like, who cares? But they're going to, when you're dating, are they going to come pick you up?
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, you look really good, but you're, I don't know.
Well, and
you're
the whole
heavy.
BMI thing can kind of like screw with your head if you're like, oh, I'm like borderline on the higher end of normal,
I'm actually, according to BMI, I'm overweight.
That's crazy.
Well, and that's why the waist. Well, thank you.
The COVID 20 hit you hard though. Let's be real.
You mean the 20 inches here?
Ew.
Oh dear.
Oh yeah. Oh dear is exactly right. Sorry, our pathology is showing already. I know.
Flex again, and I'll do it again.
Oh no, I won't. The better than what's been shown. And this is true, as a better predictor of problems is the waist height ratio. And again, that was also in someone's book that I won't reference at the very end of it. No, anyway. But the point is, though, if I'm 5'9", half that's 69 inches, half that is about 34.5.
Okay.
That is the largest my waist should ever be.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not saying that's good. But what they've shown is when your waist is over half your height, that is when you're at a much higher risk for metabolic disease.
Okay.
And it's a very, very strong correlate, much better than BMI, because my BMI isn't good.
Right.
Where my waist height ratio, if you do the fraction, it's below 0.5. So I'm in 0.4 something, which is in the good metabolic stage. And so it's a much better way of tracking because that's what matters anyway. Now, you're a special case because you actually have to weigh in. You have a weight class, so I get that.
Yeah.
But for most people, I'm like, get rid of that scale. Who cares? Worry about how your clothes are fitting you. And by the way, we want to gain muscle mass.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, so those are the big things. So we'll kind of circle back around.
Okay.
So you're going to do a food log.
Okay.
Anything caloric that's food or drink. Okay. The time, and just kind of a description of what it is.
Okay.
And if there's something crazy like some Costco, let's say you're eating some bar, and then it's doing something crazy with your blood sugar, we're going to go do some investigation, see what's in that sucker.
Right. Okay.
You know, because there may be something in there that's really causing a problem.
Okay.
You're going to do your self-stress level, and we'll do that near the end of the day, because sometimes when you wake up in the morning, you know, you should. I hope you're not waking up freaking out. No. But usually by the end of the day, people are kind of like, what was that day like? You know, 1 to 10, 10 being an amazing day, 1 being a horrible, stressful day. Sleep the same way, but do that in the morning. Kind of gauge, how am I feeling when I wake up? Am I feel like I didn't rest at all? You know, the same idea, 1 to 10. And then just the waist thing. And I'll have you do just because you have to weigh in, we will keep track of weight, but we'll do that every 2 weeks or so.
We'll keep it at the bottom of the screen the whole time.
Oh, lovely.
We're not going to put anything like that up there at all. You know what? You're going to have to do the next podcast with your shirt off.
Easy, bro.
That's all I'm going to say right now.
Impressive.
Well,
it'll be the best downlighting ever.
Oh, my God.
I'll have to, it'll be like at the gym, and they'll be like, guys, I knew your pressure was heavy. I knew it. Yeah.
That's why, right?
Jeez.
Of course.
Wow. So, do you have any other questions at all?
I don't think so, not at this point. I'm probably going to have a lot after. And
I would expect you to, and that's and I'm going to have a lot of questions too, and we're going to analyze that. We'll get together right before the podcast. I'll kind of review everything, and then we'll kind of go through it all, if that's cool with you.
Yeah.
And then what about Bill or Olivia? Do you guys have some?
Well, I had a question, and you probably already mentioned it, but is she going to be doing taking down notes of her glucose after working out as well?
Yeah.
Or after jiu-jitsu?
So.
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah.
What she'll have on the exercise log, we're going to be able to see. You can, absolutely.
Okay.
But we're going to be able to have a whole data points for all that stuff as long as you have the time. I don't want you sitting there getting crazy with it.
I mean, it's like a week or whatever. It's fine.
Sure, but if you wanted to, any extra little data points if you happen to see, would be great. What I'm going to be really interested to see is what your blood sugar looks like with the meal after your jiu-jitsu training, 2 hours after that.
Okay.
Which could be a little problematic because then if you eat and it's like 8 o'clock, it could be like 10 p.m. before you're taking a reading. So hopefully that's okay.
Is it pretty strict, the 2 hours?
Yep.
Okay,
that's
not
fine.
An hour.
Nope. 2 hours, because then I can say at that point, if you're over like that 115, 120, that you're not handling whatever you did well.
Okay.
Okay. 1 hour, I even, what I did, it's a good question because I did put 1 hour in when I had in my book that I had a 1 hour and a 2 hour, but really let's keep it simple and at 2 hours because that's when where the rubber meets the road, kind of 2 hours. And just to kind of tease some upcoming podcasts, we're going to have some stuff with strength training around grappling, and probably one of the most important ones we're going to do is going to be coming up on all sources of stress, and how they interact together to affect your health.
Okay.
and how to manage them and how to figure out. And so some of the stuff you're already going to be doing with the log. You're going to kind of see how that stuff is affecting you. So I think it's going to be cool.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm
yeah,
ready
it should
to
be
do
good.
it.
So we're gonna have you back in and kind of go over it. It'd probably be a little longer podcast because we're gonna kind of go over some numbers and really give some recommendations, and then we'll have a plan for you, and then we'll follow up and see how you did.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Sounds cool.
Yeah.
So there's also some of the other ones that we have coming up. We have the stress episode.
Yep.
And then we have getting stronger for grappling.
That's right.
Specifically. There's one when we have Andrew on, which will also talk about a little bit of functional like range in stretching and injury prevention, and also some strength in there as well.
We will. And, these podcasts are going to cover, as you know, various parts of health, wellness, performance, injury prevention, and all that. And we probably should do a little intro to tell us what we're all about. But
We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there. But in general, that's we're going to kind of.
And also questions. We want if anyone wants to send in questions.
Yeah, and especially things like this, because this is a huge. People are always asking, "What should I do for nutrition?"
Right.
Like, and you're like, "Well, this worked for me, but this is, and it
and
doesn't
there's so
necessarily."
much information out there. It's overwhelming.
Well,
and contradicting information.
There's many reasons for that. There's because there are some camps that have agendas. There's some people that look at nutrition as a religion. They call them orthorexics. You've heard of anorexic, but orthorexic, they're like, you have to be keto or you have to be whatever. I'm not picking on keto because there's all these things can have a place, right? If you are a florid diabetic type 2, you better be, I'd probably put you on a super low carb keto looking type of thing, right? But to tease some of the stuff we're going to talk about at our next one with you is, we're going to start with real food as much as possible, right? And get rid of this stuff. All those little things on the back of the labels that we can't pronounce. Those are wild cards.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're probably, the liver's got to do something with them. The body's got to take care of it. And it usually adds pretty much stress to the system. So
I won't change it yet, so you can see my real
We'll
life.
be super judgy too. We'll be like, I cannot believe you're eating this crap.
That's okay. I'll just take it out in your next haircut. I'm just joking.
Actually, what we can do to get back is, get old Snacky Cakes, a food log, and see what his food log looks like.
I think Bill should do this with me.
Whoa.
Oh, gauntlet thrown down.
I think so.
Well, I was thinking about doing the quasi-carnivore starting this.
Yes, and we'll talk about that too. And again, that might be a good thing for Bill. It might not. But we don't know until we try and get some data on it.
Yeah, I might be eating perfect right now.
You might.
I had half a pint of ice cream last night.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, I know. He's a mess.
It's a life.
Olivia confirms.
It's a life.
Oh, for sure.
That was after El
Oh no,
Paso.
he's got a problem.
Okay.
He'll.
Well, that's why I feel like Bill should do it with me, because then I won't feel half as bad.
Maybe I'll do like the food journal just to
and we'll compare.
Yeah, just so like you can go first, and then as soon as you're like, oh man, I didn't eat quite as good, and then I'll go, and you're like, well,
and then Brittany and I can virtue signal.
yeah,
Using you as
Yeah.
But then we can feel good about ourselves.
Right. Your protein will be from the spinning wheel of death from 7-Eleven.
the dog food I ate.
Bill, that's all I had today for Brittany. We'll kind of keep it.
Yeah, I think it went over everything that we wanted to kind of preface for the journey that we're about to go on with Brittany here. When is the tournament potentially? Is this maybe 5 weeks out, 8 weeks?
Well, I was thinking about doing I think there's one in March.
What's that, Grappling Industries?
Grappling Industries
I think Rev too.
There's Rev and I haven't decided which one yet. I think I'm going to do whatever one my daughter does, because it would just be easier.
Totally.
To do it all in one day. So probably March.
Plenty of time.
Beginning of March.
Yeah.
And then I think Grappling Industries is end of March, right?
I think it's like the second weekend if you
We'll
right in the middle.
Yeah.
We'll get that all sorted out.
Right.
Right. So we have the better part of 2 months to work with at least.
Right.
So I think that's plenty of time, and you have a very realistic, what you're trying to do too. So
yeah, I'm excited to do it. So
cool.
Perfect. Well, and also shout out to Jonathan.
Oh my
for
goodness.
The paintings
for sure.
behind Chris. Chris, look to your left. So maybe it'll focus. Close your eyes. Hide your eyes with your hand. Yes. Focus. It was doing it earlier, but it's not going to do it today.
How about this way?
No, because your eyeball, we can see your eyeball. Here, just step out of the screen.
Oh
Step
my
out of the screen. Flip those. Ooh, there he is. Jonathan Blaylock. You can come back, Chris. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
We have a
awesome stuff.
really talented artist that we train with, and so we want to give him a shout out. Also to Cascade Jiu-Jitsu and Professor Andrew Solheim, who brought all of us together, this bunch of misfits.
He
and
birthed
For
us.
He did birth us. I'm sure he'll doesn't want to take credit for that, but we're going to have him on next podcast. We're going to be talking about strength training for grappling. So I think it's going to be cool.
Perfect.
Before we go, Brittany, anything else you want to add? Comments, insults at Bill, anything you want to throw?
No, I hope I wasn't too awkward. It's a little nerve-wracking.
When you broke wind, that was weird.
Oh,
Yeah,
that was my stomach growling.
I didn't
you were
say anything.
Late.
And on that note, thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All righty.
Okay.
Whoa.